Hello, I am Jonathan Crook, Print Technical Consultant for HP. In this training video, I will quickly show you how to set up faxing in the FutureSmart 4 or 5 firmware platform on our enterprise class devices. Depending on your model and firmware level, some features or buttons may not be available. Today, I am using enterprise class 6 series devices. So faxing in the HP enterprise space, there are multiple options. One is analog fax, which is basically adding a fax card to the devices. And then we also have LAN fax and internet fax. Those two are used generally in conjunction with fax server solutions that are out in the market today. Today, I'm going to discuss all three and setting those up. So the first one is the standard analog fax. You add a fax card to the machine, you plug in a phone line, and the machine faxes out. So after you've added the fax card into the device, some options become available inside of the EWS. So first we'll log in as the administrator, and then we're going to go to fax. From here, you will see an internal modem option available to you. If you do not have an internal modem option available to you, that means there is not an analog fax card installed on the machine, and you'll need to get one in order for this function to work. So from here, there are some basic job settings, and like most videos, I don't go over every single setting here, but you can see a lot of them available. But we're going to go to internal modem. And in order for the analog fax to work, you are required to put in the location, the company name, and the fax number of the device. Now, the fax number of the device does not actually have to be it. You can see here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? That could be pretty much anything, but the fax number is important when you're faxing off to someone because they should see that fax number as well in case they want to fax back to you. So, and as you scroll down, you can see some of the additional things. In most cases, you don't need to actually change any settings for the internal modem, right? Just add these three here and pretty much you're good to go. The default settings work pretty well. Once you do that, you hit apply, and that's going to set up the modem and all the settings for here. After you've hit apply, then you're actually going to want to go ahead and check off enable fax send. So I already have it enabled here, but you want to make sure because by default it is disabled. Now, with faxing from an analog perspective, there are some additional things like you can create quick sets, which are shortcuts that pre-populate fax numbers and things like that. We also have speed dials, and you can see we have a receive setup and an activity log. One of the things we get asked a lot about is can you forward or archive? And basically what that means is can you send a fax, incoming fax, to maybe email or folder? And this is where you do that here. So under fax, archive, and forwarding, you can tell it what it's going to do based on that analog fax settings. Some customers may want just it immediately to take the fax that's being received and send an email, and they can say who it's going to, right? Or they might say archive and print and do the same thing. But you can see here we do have three options: email, network folder, and FTP server for you to choose from. If you are using email, you will need to be able to set up the SMTP server for the email server for the machine to use. We also do have the ability to have it actually forward to another fax number. So you can see here, it'll use the internal modem, and then you can plug in a different number here for any of the received faxes. Once you've figured out and set up how you want to handle the forwarding or archiving of the faxes, just hit apply on the right, and that will save those settings for you. Now, the other options are LAN fax and internet fax. And for this, I'm going to switch over to another machine logged in as an administrator. And like I said, LAN fax and internet fax are meant for fax server solutions. And so depending on your fax server solutions, some act as a folder monitor. And so what they're anticipating is that a device, when they're sending a fax, is actually just going to put a document into a folder on a server, and it's going to monitor that server, and it's going to pick up that fax and send it off. The other one is a fax server actually acts as an email forwarding system, right? So it acts as an email server itself, and that's how you set that up. And so that's how these work here. So if we go into LAN fax, HP enterprise class devices are designed to work with a lot of third-party solutions out there today, right? Um, you will more than likely see potentially the one you're using right here in this list. But the way the LAN fax works is folder paths. And you can see here, I've kind of set up my machine to act like it's sending a fax. And it's going to drop the fax into this folder utilizing these credentials here. That's how LAN fax works. And so you would plug in this information and then check any of the settings down here and hit apply. And that's how you would do that. The other option is internet fax. And internet fax works based on email servers. And so most of the time you can see here I'm using Office 365, but fax server solutions tend to have their own SMTP address. And so that's where you would plug this in here. And then what you would do is actually add the domain here based on the fax server settings, right? So that comes from your fax server. It could be at fax.com, it could be at your company's name.com, whatever the case may be. And then you're going to click on add. And what this is going to do is it's actually going to communicate with the SMTP server, verify is this domain correct, and it's going to add it to the list here. And that's important because regardless of whether you're using the internal modem, right? You're using the internal modem or you're using LAN fax or internet fax, the end user experience is someone walks up to the HP, hits the fax button, and just types a number in, right? They don't have to enter anything else. And so when it comes to the internet fax setup, basically what it does is it takes that fax number that end user has dialed, puts it there, and then adds this domain that's registered to the end of it and sends it off to the email server to be sent out. So that's how you set up and adjust the different fax options available on the enterprise class devices. I hope this has been informative for you. Have a great day.